trade relations, competition, energy conflicts, NATO, national security, and many others. And all that to me that leads me to Turkey. For me, I am really interested in Turkey as a country that has grown incredibly in the last 20 years in terms of population, economy, and military. And Turkey is also an amazing geographical location between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And it's looking to establish itself as a regional decision maker. And also the relation between Turkey and NATO are as complex as the relations between Turkey and Russia. And both countries already know each other from interventions in conflicts like the war in Libya, Syria, or Nagorno-Karabakh. And an important fact to me is that Turkey met with Ukraine in Kiev on February the 3rd and wanted to position itself as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. But first, Erdogan wanted to assure the free trade agreement between Turkey and Ukraine, and also a military cooperation between both countries, and somehow to show to Russia that it cannot dictate the forms of bilateral relation between the neighbors. And also, I have many questions. The first one is that how do you think that the dynamics of power between Turkey and Russia changed after meeting each other in conflicts in the region, and also how the cooperation between Ukraine and Turkey will change that? That's the first one.
Okay. Well, it's a very interesting question because there are a lot of ties between Ukraine and Turkey. There are a lot of commercial ties. I've been to Ukraine many times, and one of the things that I've noticed from my Ukrainian friends is one of their favorite vacation destinations is Turkey. So there's tourism, there's lots of bilateral exchange, if you will, that existed, before that. And there's also tension that existed between Russia and Turkey beforehand, increasing, you might say, regional rivalry, because all of them, both Russia and Ukraine and Turkey, all share one sea, the Black Sea. And the Black Sea is incredibly important for all three of them, both from a security standpoint and from a trade relations standpoint. From a security standpoint, how? The Russians have their only, shall we say, warm water seaport. It's the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. If you know anything about Russian history, for many, many decades, I would say centuries, it's been a key, shall we say, interest of Russia to have a warm water seaport. And Sevastopol and the Black Sea Fleet is, an example of that. In particular, long before the current conflict in Ukraine, one of the reasons strategically that was given afterwards by analysts for Russia annexing Crimea was to secure the position of the Black Sea Fleet. So that's one, you might say, one reason. Now, in terms of Turkey, there's a growing, like you said, trade relationship between Turkey and Ukraine. And in particular, the thing that was interesting that happened as a result of the war in Ukraine is it had, you might say, a second-order effect. And the second-order effect was on food prices. And in particular, it was on grain prices. Now, why is that? Well, essentially, Russia and Ukraine are two of the world's largest producers of grain. And the countries that normally depend on that grain are not, you might say, necessarily Western Europe or North America, but places in Africa and other parts of the world. And what's happened as a result of that is that there was a global, basically, food crisis that happened as a result of the war, because if the Ukrainians were not allowed, basically, to ship their grain out of the port of Odessa because it was being blocked, not only would that cause a problem, obviously, for Ukraine, because it was a major source of their income, but it also caused, you might say, a second-order effect to all these other countries, some of which may have gotten, the majority of their grain, either from Russia or from Ukraine. So what Turkey did, which was interesting, is, you might say, intervened and agreed to be this honest broker and basically negotiated something called the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And by doing that, they increased, shall we say, their role or their their prominence, on the world stage, and by being the ones to initially, basically negotiate, shall we say, this agreement, which has to be renewed, obviously, from time to time. So that gave Erdogan something that he really wanted, which was this idea that Turkey can be a mediator in this conflict. So that's how I would say.
Thank you very much. If Dr. Said wants to add something.
Okay. So, in my opinion, I support all what has been said. I would like to add something concerning Turkey. Turkey, the problem only in this, I think, the relations between Turkey and Ukraine, not only in trade, but a very special type of trade, which is defense industry, like drones, Bayraktar. So what is the most effective drones in Turkey? And it is now made in Ukraine with some development. So this license is used by Ukrainians to fight Russia. So it could be critical, embarrassing to Turkey, but it could be also part of pressure at the same time. This is the personality of Erdogan, as we mentioned, that he used all what he has. Okay, and one of them like this. But there is something really bigger than that. He tries, Erdogan, to be balanced with both Putin and Zelensky. Remember, he is NATO member. But at the same time, usually he is close to Russia for specific reasons. Erdogan believes whatever I need from the United States and Europe, which are NATO countries, when you don't give me, I will take from your enemy. Like S-400, when we took it from Israel. The problem with S-400 is really more than we can imagine. How? When we are using air defense system, so you have this air defense system, and at the same time, he is a partner of project of F-16, and he would like to buy other, even developed aircrafts. So, like Egypt, we have F-16, and we have Russian what we call it, air defense weapons. The aircrafts which we have, even they are American, and the air defense weapons which we have also, even they are Russian, they must be compatible to each other. They must know each other. And if I am industrial country, have research labs and factories to develop any weapons, Turkey, I'm talking about Turkey, and I have the F-16 in development, and I have S-400, which is the enemy of F-35 and F-16 as well, and I made them compatible, who guarantees that Russia will know the secret keys of F-16 via Turkey? So it's more than we can imagine. It's really difficult. That's why the United States was very angry with Turkey when they did so. However, if I come back to our points, so Turkey knows very well, Erdogan knows very well, how can he use his partners and his allies. So if Russia became a partner, he doesn't forget his allies, but also he used his partner, which is Russia, to put pressure on the United States. And the last point I can say, which really I support much, that's why it gave him the opportunity to play as mediator later. In the beginning, he was rejected by Putin. Putin neglected him. He looked at him from, the beginning of the war. He didn't like to listen to him. He's the first one he listened to. He was president of France, Macron, only because France was the leader of the European Union at that time, right? But he didn't listen to Putin. But after some time, he felt, to Erdogan, Putin started to listen to Erdogan as a very important mediator when the situation of Russia became worse and worse.
So, regarding what both of you said, I would like to ask a question that has relation with these arguments. Can we say that Turkey is a NATO member that is aligned with Russia but provides military support to Ukraine? Because there are some critical voices inside NATO that says that it is closer to the Kremlin than it is to NATO. So, after all the cooperation that we are witnessing, can we confirm that, or will you argue something else? Dr. Marc, if you want to begin with this question. Sorry, my question was that there are some critical voices inside NATO that are concerned about the proximity of Turkey with Russia. Would you say that we can confirm that Turkey is a country that is a NATO country, that it's aligned with Russian ideas or and provides at the same time military support to Ukraine?
I think there are different levels of understanding. One is the psychological, and I suppose that Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Putin can understand and say that somehow the same views of the relationship with the country, with their people, and the way how to run this country and these people. They are very close, and they can completely, they don't need to speak, again, they understand themselves, they have the same logics. But now, how to translate this into real action of supporting? In order to support, you have to be strong first. And I'm not sure Mr. Erdogan is now that much looking out of the borders of Turkey. He first has to run his own country, and he cannot engage the country into adventures like this one, which is very touchy. He's in the, his best choice is to keep close to the two groups, to the two countries, and to try to have a positive role in ending this war, which is not easy at all. Certainly, he has other priorities, perhaps, but this is very important for Turkey in order to assess Turkey as a major player in the area and at the global level.
Okay, I can add here something. I support what he said in a very important point. You remember also during my two lectures I mentioned that there are some leaders of the countries are countries or persons more than countries of institutions. So Putin and Erdogan, both of them really, and so they have their own charisma, they have their own perspective, and that's why they understand each other. And that's why they will get close, but closer more and more. But Turkey knows very well it's a NATO member and it needs NATO, not only that. And remember I don't know if you know that or not, NATO members now 31 countries, I think 28 are European, and 3 only non-European, United States, Turkey and Canada, right? If any problem happen between two NATO countries, one of them European, the other one non-European, so the privilege will go to the European. So that's why Turkey does not want to make any, this we give example between Turkey and Greece, for example. And Russia is a very main point of the problems between both Turkish and Greek, two countries. So that's why Turkey, when it's getting closer to Russia, it's very careful. Putin thinks very carefully that he is not European country. That's why in the beginning, when he took over his position, his eye was on Europe to be a European member to enjoy the full NATO privilege as European country member of NATO. He is not. When I try to reflect that on your very important question, that his relations have to be balanced between the United States and Russia, or between even NATO and Russia, he must consider these dimensions I mentioned right now. But the point with Russia, Russia is the biggest country all over the world, 17 million kilometers square. It is a bordering country to Turkey. And same like Ukrainians, they spend their summer in Turkey, the Russians, they do the same. He needs their tourism, he needs the trade, he needs the gas. One of the biggest losers when you don't use the Russian gas is Turkey, not only Russia. So he has to think about all of this and more dimensions, I think.
All right. I guess I'll, shall we say, begin my remarks with something you may be familiar with. There's a famous quote in international relations. He said, there are no eternal enemies, there are no eternal allies, it's only eternal interests. So, I think what it means nowadays is that because we're living this increasingly, shall we say, multipolar world, countries will start to differentiate their interests based on the issues. That you may have cooperation in some areas and not cooperation in other areas. This has happened, I would say, for hundreds of years, but in particular, in the last, I would say, 30 years, since the since the Cold War ended, is that you're seeing a fracturing of traditional alliances. Whereas it used to be just NATO against, Warsaw Pact. But now things are a little bit more, I would say, a lot more complicated. So for Turkey, it's more complicated for them as well, because if it was, shall we say, the Cold War, then they could say if they join NATO, they're protected by NATO, they don't have to worry about Russia anymore. But the thing is that now, things are a little bit more complex. And I think Turkey themselves, what they see is the fact that they have to employ also this thing I mentioned a little bit before, this hedging strategy. When you have, I'll explain it this way. Imagine that you have imagine you have two elephants in a room. And then you have perhaps, a bobcat. The elephant number one is the United States. Elephant number two is Russia. And you're caught as the bobcat between them. What is your strategy? You know you can't win militarily or even against either of them, and you also know that you need both of them, economically speaking. So what do? You try to satisfy both of them. And you also try to not get stepped on. And so with Turkey, I think what they did, what they're trying to do, I guess, is that even through terms of psychobiography, that's kind of like how you can learn how both basically Putin and Erdogan share a similar worldview. You can know that from this field of psychobiography. In addition to that, the thing that's important to understand is that Turkey, and in particular Erdogan, he sees himself as a neo-Ottoman. Somebody that is going to restore, shall we say, the glory of Turkey, of the Ottoman Empire. And this is important from a narrative of, you might say, how a country sees itself. If you follow constructivist IR theory, they say that identity equals interest. Or in many ways, identity influences interest. So how does Turkey see itself? Which is very important because Turkey, I believe, just like Russia, sees itself more as a civilizational culture. What do I mean by that? I mean it's a culture that has a great past, but also have a great future. For example, when Putin talks about Russia, he doesn't talk about Russian people, he talks about the Russian state, the Russian empire, and how he believes that he needs to restore, for example, the role of Russia on the world stage. Erdogan thinks of Turkey in a very similar way. He, unlike Kemal Ataturk, basically, who was trying to, distance himself, shall we say, from a religious, you might say, expression of, Ottomanism. Erdogan did the reverse. He actually has encouraged that and, in fact, has embraced a lot of, you might say, this more religious aspect. You can see Putin has done the same thing, that he's very closely, quote-unquote, allied with the Russian Orthodox Church. And you will see a lot of the pronouncements of the Russian Orthodox Church about the war in Ukraine are very different, shall we say, than other churches are. So the point is that for Erdogan, he's trying to play this hedging strategy because he knows that he needs, like I had said, and I completely agree with him, he needs both partners. He can't afford to alienate the Russians or to alienate the U.S.
Thank you very much. I think we also have time for another question. So if you have any idea, or should I take the floor?
Thank you. Yes, you have mentioned earlier, Mr. Sayed, the gas commerce, and I think that it is a very important issue right now. I wanted to ask you if how do you think that the Ukrainian war is going to change the gas commerce global order and benefit the Middle East instead of Russia? If you think that now Europe and other powers are going to benefit more from the Middle East region and the, for example, natural resources that it can give, or it is going to continue the Russian path?
As far as I know, the needs of Europe of gas is really huge, more the capabilities of the Middle East. But at the same time, European countries insist to not to take the Russian gas, at least for the moment, during the regime of Putin. And that's why Germany promised that during 5 years maximum, 3 to 5 years from the starting of the war, to have the liquefying stations, liquefy the gas, and then it can, because Germany was the main problem of that, by the way, as everybody knows. But anyway, so hopefully, the biggest gas field in our region is the gas field between Iran and Qatar, and it's shared. Qatar is the smallest country, they have the bigger portion, the gas field in the Gulf, shared with Iran. And remember, Iran is allied to Russia. And what about Qatar? Qatar, they were small. They said, when they talked with Ms. Ursula in the European Union, I think she visited Qatar, I think, if I'm not wrong. And Qatar said something. If you'd like to sign with me to take gas from Qatar, you have to sign for long term. Don't tell me after 15, as I told you right now, that you don't want gas with Putin regime. So suppose that Russia will change the regime, Russia became a democratic country, for example, and very good ally to Europe, let me say, and then they will give you gas as Qatar. Then I'm finished, because you don't need my gas anymore. You will go back to Russia or Azerbaijan or so. So this is problem. And I think they signed a long-term one. On the other hand, remember during my last lecture I mentioned something. They need to take Egyptian gas and even the gas which would be collected in Egypt from the neighboring countries in Eastern Mediterranean, and then take it from Egypt. But it was postponed for some planning issues, plan and when exactly the timetable. But now they decided, no, we will take whenever you are finished. Whenever you are liquefied or you have the gas, we will take it from you. So Europe became more flexible. But there is another thing, I think it has been noticed or taken in consideration, which is very important. I don't know if I'm wrong or right. If anybody knows, please correct me. The Russian gas is not all of it is not Russian gas. It's from Azerbaijan and other countries around. Russia, because of some agreements, they take the gas from Azerbaijan, for example, with a very few money, very little money, and they sell it to Europe comparatively very expensive. What happened was, Kazakhstan, not Azerbaijan. It's a mistake. Kazakhstan. It's not Azerbaijan, it's Kazakhstan. What happened with Kazakhstan just a few months before the war? It was something like rebellion inside the country against the current regime, and they believe that the current regime of Kazakhstan is pro the previous president, who I think in UAE right now, something like that. And they need democracy more, they disagree with Russia. And Russia has to deploy forces in Kazakhstan according to the agreement with some forces with the 6 countries, including Kazakhstan, to stop this kind of rebellion, and it's finished. But Kazakhstan, the current one right now, gradually started to take apart, to be separate more from Russia, like he denies annexation of any provinces from Ukraine to Russia. He denied that. He said it cannot be 500 countries as United Nations members, dividing, I disagree. And they start more and more to be separate from Russia. This gives me indicator that maybe Europe will have a direct connection with Kazakhstan. I'm not sure about geography. It's just strategy of the gas spreading. I'm not sure about that. But I think maybe it would be good opportunity for Europe in the future. This is what I have about this.
Okay, so I think if someone has something to add, we will be...
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, the one of Kazakhstan, because this is a huge country that is populated half by Russians by origin, and the other by Kazakhs, and they are turning side more and more. They feel threatened by what happens to Ukraine, because they could be the next one on the list. Because of the gas, because of all the wealth that they have in their soil, and also in agriculture. So they are turning more and more to China also. And so they can sell their gas, or they can sell anything that they produce to China, which is a major importer, and they could benefit more. So there are two sides. The fact that they don't want to be swallowed again by Russia, and the other that they have another option that is, for the long term, much more palatable, more interesting for them.
Let me add something very important about China and Kazakhstan. Just recently, maybe 1 month ago, China declared, which is very rare to happen, right, that Kazakhstani people can enter China without visa. This is not possible by Chinese to any country. And I think, as my friend mentioned right now, is the role of China. Where is the main competition area of these two major powers, Russia and China? Central Asia. Especially this because Belt and Road, because of the gas. And in 2014, there was agreement of gas has been signed. It had been signed between China and Russia. I think, as Marc said right now, that maybe something will happen between China and Kazakhstan directly. So if I look at the east, far east, and the west, so I think Kazakhstan will be in the center to get gas because it had a big, huge amount of gas, really, which Russia was depending on to give you your gas, right? So I think Kazakhstan will be in the middle with Europe and China will be very happy with that. That's why when you ask yourself, why China does not directly support Russia in its war against their main enemy, the United States? Because Russia is main competitor to China, even security-wise sometimes. So, and this is one of the reasons. They were always believing, the Chinese, that the Russians are, like shocking them like this, hanging them like this from their neck because of the energy. Not only they have the biggest source of energy, or they are members of OPEC and OPEC Plus and so, but also even the countries which can give gas freely, directly, like Kazakhstan to China. Russia stopped that. According to the agreements with these countries like Kazakhstan and others, no, you cannot give to Europe, you cannot give to China, they have to take from you through us. So now it's a good opportunity. That's one of the mistakes or the bad, very bad impacts on the Russians from the war. This issue. Thank you.
That is wonderful. Thank you very much to all of you. I think we ought to start by doing the round of questions to the public. So if anyone have any question, please raise your hand.
Thank you very much for your discussion. It's been really interesting. I have a question for Sayed. When you talk about the Merkava tank of the Israelis, yeah, I would like to ask you if you think that would be a good idea to send it to Ukraine due to the conception of the tank for Middle East rather than Ukrainian territory and European climate and all the warfare things there. And also because of all the potential conflicts Israel has around it, if they send the tanks, a few tanks, not all the tanks, but up there, it has been seen that during the wars, the tanks are really difficult to repair and replace. So if they send them to Ukraine, wouldn't that be a really problem maybe in the future or a lack of force?
I think, yeah, you are right in a very important thing, and I didn't mention during my discussion because I was not talking. Do you remember I said what? That we heard that maybe they give Merkava to European country or directly to Israel. I'm not sure. But if we talk technically, I agree with you. How? You know, as a tank, Merkava tank, it's built by Israel, and it's mostly to be used in the desert. It could be used in other terrain, for example. We have desert warfare, we have mountainous warfare, plain warfare, attacking obstacles warfare, and so on. It's good for several, but to fight in very cold weather and frozen as the snow or something like that, I'm really not sure. I'm not tanker anyway. So, but what can I say that really, yeah, I'm not sure it can, but concerning logistics and supply, it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. Why? Remember, tanks, they are not like cars, you know. Now, what we call it, the standard model of the calibration of the main gun is 120 millimeters. And most of them became from inside, we call it not circles like this. It's very smooth inside. This is smooth inside. So any kind of weapons could be used easily, even by Leopard, by Challengers, by even Russian tanks could be used also for Merkava. For maintenance, and so I don't think it's that difficult, you know, to support with maintenance. But what is the point here? In this war, usually during the fight, we consider two things when we plan. One of them is the quantity, the amounts of weapons to each side to make the comparison, strategic comparison. How many tanks you have here, how many tanks you have there. And the other one is the qualitative comparison. Like some aircrafts, you can fight 4 aircrafts in one time, right? Or 8 sometimes. Some tank can fight 2 or 3 tanks. So in this case, even with small number of tanks, you can fight Russian tanks which are not capable to fight them, especially Russia lost a lot of tanks. So anyway, yes, it should be considered, the weather, the climate, the type of terrain, but it's not must that, no, I cannot take this tank or not. If I need it for numbers, at least I will take it.
Thank you very much. Further question, please? Yes?
Thank you, and I would like to ask again to Professor Sayek. It's about how will Russia be, how will they be able to manage their control over the ex-Soviet countries like Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, in case of a new emergency, like, I don't know, for example, if the Georgians try to get back the South Ossetia and the other zone, will they be capable of defending their interests, or they won't be able to?
Oh, this one really difficult, to be honest. But I can tell you, as we discussed even, I think yesterday, you remember I said something that Russia depends on size of land and how much resources you have. The countries of Western Europe, for example, I'm not talking about Georgia now, Moldova and other countries you mentioned, and those like South Ossetia and some Central Asia. If I compare them with Eastern European countries who joined NATO, right? All of them, or most of them, were Soviet Union, some of them, or at least allies to Soviet Union, or with Warsaw Alliance, right? And they left Soviet Union or outside Soviet Union, and they joined European Union, or they left Warsaw and they joined NATO. Why? Because they found that they are really partners. They are really partners. On the other side, the other countries, they don't see that. Russia look at them as they are ownership. You belong to me, and one day, sooner or later, you will be part with the Russian Federation. And that's why when they changed the name of Soviet Union to Russian Federation, it was intended that it will be composed with several republics, as there are now 21 republics. And believe me, I don't know more than 2 or 3 names, like Chechnya, Dagestan. I don't know the others. Or Southern Ossetia or something like that. Because they are fake states, artificial. They are not truly states. So it's easy to have artificial states, but it's not easy to have them as allies. So I think this war will threaten Putin more than those countries will think. I give an example, Serbia. The Serbian president, he started to learn Russian language, especially a few years ago before the war, to be closer to Putin. He was meeting him as a friend. Right? Look at him right now. Number one, according to the law, Wagner cannot recruit any soldiers from my country. Number two, what you are doing, I disagree. There is no annexation to any country. And the problem with Serbia right now, Kosovo. And if you would like to join, he wants to be European Union country like you, right? If you would like to join us, okay, recognize Kosovo as a country. It's very clear, and I think he's thinking about that, right? And Russia is playing in this. They try to, no, Kosovo is yours, forget about them, and so on. And this is Serbia, which is far from him. What about the countries which they feel they are under his custody, very close to him? Like the 6 countries, okay, which were part of Soviet Union, and Georgia, which always under threat, and they believe, Georgia and Moldova believe they will be the next step, the next on the list, as my friend mentioned. They will be the next, they will be taken by Russia if he continues this way. So I don't think it's easy to him now to think the same as you try to think right now. How can I keep them even? Not to guarantee that they are with me. He is not sure that he can keep them. I don't think so.
So I also wanted to answer your question. I guess we'll put it this way. There's a history, at least the last 25, maybe 30 years, of frozen conflicts in Eastern Europe. First in Georgia, then obviously annexation of Crimea, but also remember that it's not just land, it's also, you might say, in the cyber domain. That Russia had a history basically of being an aggressive cyber actor. For example, in Estonia in 2007, in Ukraine, where they essentially shut down part of the power grid.
And against Belgium.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the point is that even in many ways, if you can, I think it happened in 2007, they even shut down part of the Ukrainian, basically gas pipeline during the winter time. I think it was in 2006 or 2007. So Russia had a history of doing this, and then also a history of creating and then maintaining frozen conflicts. Why? To destabilize these regimes. Now, because of what's happened in Ukraine, it's going to be much more difficult for them to do that, because before there was, again, from an information standpoint, the strategic narrative that you don't want the Russian bear in your backyard. Because if you do, eventually they're going to start nibbling off little parts of your country, and then after that, you're going to have to basically deal with them. So you better deal with them, sooner rather than later. Now, because of what's going on in Ukraine for the last 15 months, countries are starting to think differently, because they've seen that whole strategic narrative that, that the Russian military is, going to come to come to a town near you, and you don't want that. Now, that's not, I'm not saying it's something that they want, but it's not that era, shall we say, that patina of invincibility that the Russians had, the Russian military had, has been completely shattered, as a result of what's happened in Ukraine right now. Not saying that they're not an effective fighting force. That's for other military officers to evaluate. I'm not a military strategist. I'm more of a policy wonk or a information strategist. So that's the answer to your question, would be that I think they will think much more deeply. The Russians, in particular Putin right now, is more concerned, I would say, with internal politics and with Ukraine than with going on another adventure somewhere else. It doesn't mean, on the other side, that there are countries that are extremely concerned about Russia. And I was having a discussion, I think it was last night, and they mentioned an interview from I think it was on France 24, or possibly it was at a conference. I'm sorry if I'm not getting this right. The point being that they asked what were the 3 most important cities in Russia. And some people said it was either Moscow or St. Petersburg, and they said, actually, no, it's Kaliningrad, it's Sevastopol, and I think it's one other one. The point is they're outside of the Russian Federation. Kaliningrad is an enclave, basically in the Baltics, and Sevastopol, as I've talked about before, is in Crimea. So what you will see is that the Russian ability to project force, either militarily, and now I would say in terms of information, has been severely hampered because of what's going on here.
I think we have time for another question, so please.
Checking the topic. We talked yesterday about China and the context they have. Maybe if Korea, we talked about it in one of the speeches, if Korea reunites in a democratic way. And we thought about the conflict they could create between China and that possible scenario. My question is about if, depending on the results of the war, maybe, as far as it looks right now, if Ukraine goes on and keeps the whole states as a unit, if they keep all the territories they lost, and Russia becomes weaker in a military way and probably politically as well, will all these little states we just talked about, like Azerbaijan, Georgia and stuff, maybe try to join NATO? And if that happens, do you believe it would become like a huge change in the geopolitical map, because it would be a threat to China afterwards?
So, can I answer? We have to be careful about, thinking of who can join NATO or not. Because I think, I'm not NATO member, from one country, not NATO member, but from my relations, my lectures like here, for example, and with NATO as well, I think NATO think in a way, when they take any country to join NATO, the main enemy of NATO is Russia. This is NATO for Russia, not for anybody else. So when you talk about Kazakhstan and other countries, so they are, we can take you against. I give you an example, by the way, Montenegro. Montenegro, with all due respect to all countries, it's a very small country. As far as I know, if I'm not wrong, the amount of its armed forces 2,000. I don't think NATO needs these 2,000, right? If the number is correct, okay? But they need Montenegro for its geostrategic location, because it's overlooking Adriatic Sea, and the countries north, which is Croatia, and south, which is Albania, they are all NATO. So it was the remaining country to block in front of Serbia, which it was or still even allied to Russia, not to give any opportunity to Russia to penetrate through this serial of countries to the Adriatic Sea and hit NATO, which is Italy, from east, north, south, and so through this. So, geostrategy is very important, but I think NATO think more importantly about European countries. They have European countries. NATO don't think about number of countries, but they think about the value of the country which will add to NATO. On the other hand, when you see Finland join NATO in few days, but Montenegro, for example, which I mentioned, or North Macedonia or any country, they join in 5 years. Why? There are 3 to 4 years minimum for reforms, political, military, social, economic, and so on reforms to be on the level like any other European country as member of NATO. Right. So those countries, I think, from point of view of NATO, will take time to do that. And NATO would like to have countries which value added, but not burden on NATO. But maybe there is another thinking somehow in other alliances. That's why I'm preparing a new lecture, which is a new map of alliances. I think alliances would be different, would be more. Suppose that Russia became not enemy to Europe anymore, enemy to NATO anymore. So who needs NATO, right? So you have to think different. I give example, what I mean from that. And in this case, your question would be more compatible, right? I will tell you. We have European Union, which is political economic alliance, if I'm not wrong. We have NATO, which is political military alliance. We have Shanghai Cooperation, which is economic, political, military alliance, the three together. But there is difference between European Union and NATO here. If I compare with Shanghai Cooperation, the Shanghai NATO is composed of allies, true friends, when I talk about security ground. But Shanghai Cooperation is composed of enemies, like China and India, India and Pakistan, Iran and Saudi Arabia now, right? So it's composed of enemies. So it's not easy to use them as allies to fight against other one. It's number one. China also is led by China for sure. China also has Belt and Road, okay, which is economic, culture initiative. There is, I don't know if you heard about the coming one, which I tell you, Free and Open Indo-Pacific Strategy. Have you heard about it? FOIP. FOIP. I'm participating in that in Japan, actually. It's a Japanese initiative. It's economic, political, it's not military, right? And it's coming from East Asia to Africa through the Middle East with economic and semi-political and developmental initiatives. So in this case, I think the Central Asia countries, maybe by time, and Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, they need Taiwan to be a member of that, but you know the problem with Taiwan and China for sure. So they are 4 members until now: United States, Japan, India, Australia. And all of them, they are not good with China, right? So there is another thinking with the alliance here, how to increase the countries through Indo-Pacific means Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean countries. You know, how many countries there are. In this case, he can conclude, he can contain the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, try to think about Central Asian countries, which you are asking right now. Have you heard about 5I? 5I, I from I. 5 Eyes, they are Anglo-Saxonic, speak English countries, and they are more for intelligence, right? So I hear I to see and I for intelligence as well. So there is some thinking, maybe they will convert something like a military alliance, and it will be increased. We have, by the way, other 9 eyes, which is North European and West European, if you heard about them, Scandinavian countries and others. So maybe 9 eyes and 5 eyes will do another thing, right? And then they will think about the Central Asian as well. So when you look at this, your idea is perfect, I like it. But as I told you, I advise you to try to think from your own position about the future map of alliance, how it will come. Because if I were the United States, if I were Europe, and if I were China as well, I have to think about Central Asia. And remember what I mentioned in my lecture yesterday, what I said, the afternoon one. I said that we have always to remember and to consider the countries east of Iran, not only west of Iran. They are more important to both Europe, USA, and China. Eastern Iran, which is Central Asia.
Thank you very much, Professor. If Mr. Bell or Mr. Lavergne wants to add something, or we just can call it a day. So,
Chosen by all these new initiatives of alliances and the various degrees, this somehow diminishes the value of these alliances. In the past, when you made an alliance that was really a commitment to defend both countries against the rest of the world. Now it's more a matter of opportunity, what I heard right now, of these projects of so different countries being allied, where they have no real, they have some things to defend in common, but nothing to build in common. I'm quite puzzled about that. Another point is having traveled to Georgia or to the Baltic states, to Estonia in the recent years. I was so surprised when I see Georgia, for instance, is the birth land of Putin, Stalin, right? But nobody really wants to go back to the USSR. The same in Estonia, which was mentioned, where 40% of the population is Russian. And to some extent, they are secondary citizens. But they prefer to have this status in Estonia than to be back within the USSR. And this is all around the USSR. If they think they can rely on those local people that are Russian by origin, they are wrong. I mean, certainly these people, they enjoy the freedom and the quality of life that they have within Europe.
Sorry, I don't like to talk and then comment over another, but this is really important. When I was talking with official Ukrainian, I asked him a question, and believe me, his answer is not moral at all. I told him, why you believe that you will not be defeated? And he gave me 3 reasons. I will tell you one of them. He said, one of these reasons, because we hate Russia. See, when you hear it, it's moral. No, it's really important. So Russia, under command of Putin, he did not succeed. He succeeded that the countries which don't know him, like Arabian countries, we like him. We don't know him. But the countries which were under custody of the Soviet Union, they hate Russia. I was in a trip in March after the war, only 1 month in my academic trip. I visited Germany, Poland, and around, even was Belarusian border and at Ukrainian border, and I was going to get inside Ukraine, but my wife refused. So even when I took her to Poland, I told her we are going to Holland. And she was surprised. She didn't want to go. So anyway, I noticed we went first to Krakow. Krakow is at Ukrainian, close to Ukrainian, and the taxi driver, I remember this old man, older than me, and he told me, we hate Russia. We don't want those bastards to be our neighbors. And now you confirm what you say, and the Kremlin officials confirm. He did not succeed to keep people respect or love the country, love really. Because, as my friend said, he was concerning more about the prestige of Russia, the empire of Russia, not about the human. So that's why he will lose time by time. He will lose. Okay.
Thank you very much. It was a splendid roundtable. I want to thank each of you, Mr. Marc, Mr. Sayed, and Mr. Patrick. I also wanted to thank my peers over here, especially the public and the rest of the committee. So I think they deserve a bit of applause. In this case, we are finally closing this roundtable. Salva has something important to say about tomorrow's event.